The First Revolutionary Civil War, period. Analysis of the classes, in Chinese society, March. And who are our enemies? Who are our friends? This is a question of the first importance for the revolution. The basic reason why all previous revolutionary struggles in China achieved so little was the failure to unite with real friends in order to attack real enemies. A revolutionary party is the guide of the masses, and no revolution even succeeds when the revolutionary party leads them astray. To answer that, we will definitely achieve success in our revolution and will no lead the masses astray. We must pay attention to uniting with our real friends in order to attack our real enemies. To distinguish real friends from real enemies, we must make a general analysis of the economic status of the various classes in Chinese society and of their respective attitudes towards the revolution. What is the condition of each of the classes in Chinese society? The landlord class and the comprador class. One, in economically backward and semi-colonial China, the landlord class and the comprador class are wholly appendages of the international bourgeoisie, depending upon imperialism for their survival and growth. These classes represent the most backward and most reactionary relations of production in China and hinder the development of the productive forces. Their existence is utterly incompatible with the aims of the Chinese revolution. The big landlord and big comprador classes in particular always side with imperialism and constitute an extreme counter. This article was written by Comrade Mao Vol1 to combat 14 Maotse Tung, revolutionary group. Their political representatives are the etatist and the right wing of the Kuomintang. The middle bourgeoisie. This class represents the capitalist relations of production in China in town and country. The mid-bourgeoisie, by which is meant chiefly the national bourgeoisie, 3, inconsistent in its attitude towards the Chinese revolution. They feign the need for revolution and favor the revolutionary movement against imperialism and the warlords when they are smarting on the blows of foreign capital and the oppression of the warlords. B, become suspicious of the revolution when they sense that, why the militant participation of the proletariat at home and the active support of the international proletariat abroad, the revolution threatening the hope of their class to attain the status of a big bourgeoisie. Politically, they stand for the establishment of a state under rule of a single class, the national bourgeoisie. A self-styled TR disciple of Tai Chi Taofo wrote in the Chen Pao, 5 Peking, raise your left fist to knock down the imperialists and your right to knock down the communists. These words depict the dilemma and anxiety of this class. It is against interpreting the Kuomintang's principle the people's livelihood according to the theory of class struggle. It opposes the Kuomintang's alliance with Russia and the advocacy of communists and left-wingers. But its attempt to establish a state under the rule of the national bourgeoisie is quite impracticable, because the present world situation is such that the two major force, revolution and counter-revolution, are locked in final struggle. He has hoisted a huge banner. One is the red banner of revolution, he aloft by the Third International as the rallying point for all the oppressed classes of the world. The other is the white banner of counter-revolution held aloft by the League of Nations as the rallying point for all the counter-revolutionaries of the world. The intermediate classes are bound to disintegrate quickly, some sections turning left to join the revolution, others turning right to join the counter-revolution. There is no room for them to remain independent. Therefore neither of them knew where to seek reinforcements or mass scale. The side of analysis of the classes, the idea cherished by China's middle bourgeoisie of an independent revolution in which it would play the primary role is a mere illusion. The petty bourgeoisie. Included in this category are the owner peasants, 7 the master handicraftsmen, the lower levels of the intellectuals, students, primary and secondary school teachers, low government functionaries, office clerks, small lawyers and the small traders. Both because of its size and class character, this class deserve very close attention. The owner peasants and the master handicraftsmen are both engaged in small-scale production. Although all strata of this class have the same petty bourgeois economic status, they fall into 3 different sections. The first section consists of those who have some surplus money or grain, that is, those who, by manual or mental labor, earn more each year than they consume for their own support. Such people very much want to get rich and are devout worshippers of martial chow. 8 While they have no illusions about amassing great fortunes, they invariably desire to climb up into middle bourgeoisie. Their mouths water copiously when they see respect in which those small money bags are held. People of this sort are timid, afraid of government officials, and also a little afraid of the revolution. Since they are quite close to the middle bourgeoisie in economic status, they have a lot of faith in its propaganda and are suspicious of the revolution. This section is a minority among the petty bourgeoisie and constitutes its right wing. The second section consists of those who in the main are economically self-supporting. They are quite different from the people in the first section. They also want to get rich, but martial chow never lets them in recent years. Moreover, suffering from the oppression and exploitation of the imperialists, the warlords, the feudal landlords and big comprador bourgeoisie, they have become aware that the world is no longer what it was. They feel they cannot earn enough to live on by just putting in as much work as before. To make both ends meet they have to work longer hours, get up earlier, leave off later and be doubly careful at their work. They become rather abusive, denouncing the foreigners as foreign devils, the warlords as rob generals, and the local tyrants and evil gentry as the heartless riches for the movement against the imperialists and the warlords. They merely doubt whether it can succeed, on the ground that the foreigners and the warlords seem so powerful, hesitate to join it and prefer to be neutral, but they never oppose the revolution. This section is very numerous, making up about 1/2 of the petty bourgeoisie. 16 Maotse Tung. The third section consists of those whose standard of living is foul, and many in this section, who originally belonged to better off family, are undergoing a gradual change from a position of being barely up to manage to one of living in more and more reduced circumstance when they come to settle their accounts at the end of each year. Are shocked, exclaiming, "What? Another deficit?" As such pay off have seen better days and are now going downhill with every passing year, their debts mounting and their life becoming more and more miserable. They shudder at the thought of the future. They are great mental distress because there is such a contrast between the past and their present. Such people are quite important for the revolutionary movement. They form a mass of no small proportions. Are the left wing of the petty bourgeoisie. In normal times these sections of the petty bourgeoisie differ in their attitude to the revolution. But in times of war, that is, when the tide of the revolution runs high and the dawn of victory is in sight, not only will the wing of the petty bourgeoisie join the revolution, but the midsection too may join, and even right-wingers, swept forward by great revolutionary tide of the proletariat and of the left wing of petty bourgeoisie, will have to go along with the revolution. We see from the experience of the May 30th movement 9 of 1925 and peasant movement in various places that this conclusion is correct. The semi-proletariat. What is here called the semi-proletariat consists of 5 categories. 1. The overwhelming majority of semi-owner peasants. 10. 2. The poor peasants. 3. The small handicraftsmen. 4. The shop assistants. 11 and 5. The peddlers. The overwhelming majority of the semi-owner peasants together with the poor peasant constitute a very large part of the rural masses. The peasant problem is essentially their problem. The semi-owner peasants, the poor peasants and the small handicraftsmen are engaged in production on still smaller scale than the owner peasants and the master handicraftmen. Although both the overwhelming majority of the semi-owned peasants and the poor peasants belong to the semi-proletariat, th may be further divided into three smaller categories, upper, mid and lower, according to their economic condition. The semi-owned peasants are worse off than the owner peasants because every year they are short of about half the food they need, and have to make up this deficit by renting land from others, selling part of their labo power, or engaging in petty trading. In late spring and early summer when the crop is still in the blade and the old stock is consumed. Analysis of the classes in Chinese society. 1. They borrow at exorbitant rates of interest and buy grain at high prices. Their plight is naturally harder than that of the owner peasant who need no help from others, but they are better off than the poor peasants. For the poor peasants own no land, and receive only half the harvest or even less for their year's toil, while the semi-owned peasants, though receiving only half or less than half the harvest or land rented from others, can keep the entire crop from the land they own. The semi-owner peasants are therefore more revolutionary than the owner peasants, but less revolutionary than the poor peasants. The poor peasants are tenant peasants who are exploited by the landlords. They may again be divided into two categories according to their economic status. One category has comparatively adequate farm implements and some funds. Such peasants may retain half the product their year's toil. To make up their deficit they cultivate side crops, catch fish or shrimps, raise poultry or pigs, or sell part of their labor power, and thus eke out a living, hoping in the midst of hardship and destitution to tide over the year. Thus their life is harder than that of the semi-owner peasants, but they are better than the other category of poor peasants. They are more revolutionary than the semi-owner peasants, but less revolutionary than the old category of poor peasants. As for the latter, they have neither adequate farm implements nor funds nor enough manure, their crops are poor and, with little left after paying rent, they have even greater need to sell part of their labor power. In hard times they piteously beg help from relatives and friends, borrowing a few 2 or shing of grain to last them a few days, and their debts pile up like loads on the back of oxen. They are the worst off among the peasants and are highly receptive to revolutionary propaganda. The small handicraftsmen are called semi-proletarians because, though they own some simple mean of production and moreover are self-employed, they too are often forced to sell part of their labor power and are somewhat similar to the poor peasants in economic status. They feel the constant pinch of poverty and dread of unemployment, because of heavy family burden and the gap between their earnings and the cost of living. In the respect too they largely resemble the poor peasants. The shop assistants are employees of shops and stores, supporting their family on meager pay and getting an increase perhaps only once in several years while prices rise every year. If by chance you get into intimate conversation with them, they invariably pour out their endless grievances. Roughly the same in status as the poor peasants and the small 18 MAOTSE tongue, handicraftsmen, they are highly receptive to revolutionary propaganda. Peddlers, whether they carry their wares around on a pole or set up stalls along the street, have tiny funds and very small earning and do not make enough to feed and clothe themselves. Their state is roughly the same as that of the poor peasants, and like the poor peasants, they need a revolution to change the existing state of the proletariat. The modern industrial proletariat numbers about 2 million. It is not large because China is economically backward. These 2 million industrial workers are mainly employed in 5 industries, railways, mining, maritime transport, textiles and shipbuilding, and a great number are enslaved in enterprises owned foreign capitalists. Though not very numerous, the industrial proletariat represents China's new productive forces, is the most progressive class in modern China and has become the leading force in the revolutionary movement. We can see the important position of the industrial proletariat in the Chinese Revolution from the strength has displayed in the strikes of the last 4 years, such as the seamen strikes, 12 the railway strike, 13 the strikes in the Kailan and Slate coal mines, 14 the Shamin strike, 15 and the general strikes in Shanghai and Hong Kong, 16 after the May 30th incident. The first reason the industrial workers hold this position is their concentration. An other section of the people is so concentrated. The second reason their low economic status. They have been deprived of all means production, have nothing left but their hands, have no hope of ever becoming rich and, moreover, are subjected to the most ruthless treatment by the imperialists, the warlords and the bourgeoisie. That's why they are particularly good fighters. The coolies in the cities are also a force meriting attention. They are mostly doctors and rickshawen, and among them too, are sewage carters and street clean possessing nothing but their hands. They are similar in economic stat to the industrial workers but are less concentrated and play an important role in production. There is as yet little modern capital farming in China. By rural proletariat we mean farm laborers hired by the year, the month or the day. Having neither land, farm implements nor funds, they can live only by selling their labor power of all the workers they work the longest hours, for the lowest wage under the worst conditions, and with the least security of employment. They are the most hard-pressed people in the villages. And the position in the peasant movement is as important as that of the poor peasants. Analysis of the classes in Chinese society. 1. Apart from all these, there is the fairly large lumpen proletariat made up of peasants who have lost their land and handicraftsmen who cannot get work. They lead the most precarious existence of all in every part of the country. They have their secret societies, which were originally their mutual aid organizations for political and economic struggle. For instance, the Triad Society in Fujian and Guangdong, the Society of Brothers in Hunan, Hupek, Huaiko and Sichuan, the Big Sword Society in Anhui, Hunan and Shantung, the Rational Life Society in Chile 17 and the 3 northeastern provinces, and the Green Band in Shanghai and elsewhere. 1810 China's difficult problems is how to handle these people. Brave fighters but apt to be destructive, they can become a revolutionary force if given proper guidance. To sum up, it can be seen that our enemies are all those in league with imperialism, the warlords, the bureaucrats, the comprado class, the big landlord class and the reactionary section of the intelligentsia attached to them. The leading force in our revolution is the industrial proletariat. Our closest friends are the entire semi-proletariat and petty bourgeoisie. As for the vacillating middle bourgeoisie, their right wing may become our enemy and their left wing may become our friend, but we must be constantly on our guard and not let them create confusion within our ranks. Notes: 1. A comprador, in the original sense of the word, was the Chinese manager or the senior Chinese employee in a foreign commercial establishment. The comprador served foreign economic interests and had close connection with imperialism and foreign capital. 2. The Atavists were a handful of shameless fascist politicians who at that time formed the Chinese Atavist Youth League, later renamed the Chinese Youth Party. They made counter-revolutionary careers for themselves by opposing the Communist Party and the Soviet Union and received subsidies from the various group of reactionaries in power and from the imperialists. 3. For further discussion of the role of the national bourgeoisie, see the Chinese Revolution and the Chinese Communist Party, Chapter 2, Section 4, Selected Work of Mao Zedong, Vol. 2. 4. Tai Chi-tai joined the Kuomintang in his youth and for a time was Chiang Kai-shek's partner in stock exchange speculation. After Sun Yat-sen's death in 192 he carried on anti-communist agitation and prepared the ground ideologically for 20 Mao Tong, Chiang Kai-shek's counter-revolutionary coup d'etat in 1927. For years he was faithful running dog to Chiang Kai-shek in the counter-revolution. He commits suicide in February 1949, driven to despair by the imminent doom of Chiang Kai-shek's regime. 5. The Chen-Pao was the organ of the Association for the Study of Constitutional Government, a political group which supported the rule of the North warlords. 6. In 1923, Sun Yat-sen, with the help of the Chinese Communist Party, decided to reorganize the Kuomintang, bring about Kuomintang Communist Cooperation and members of the Communist Party into the Kuomintang. In January 1924, convened in Canton the Kuomintang's first National Congress at which he held down the three great policies: alliance with Russia, cooperation with the Communist Party and assistance to the peasants and workers. Mao Zedong, Li Ta-ch Lin Po-chu, Chu Chu Pai and other comrades attended the Congress and played important part in helping the Kuomintang to take the road of revolution. Some of these comrades were elected members, and others alternate members, of the Cent Executive Committee of the Kuomintang. 7. By owner peasants. Comrade Mao Zedong means the middle peasants. 8. Marshal Chao is Chao Kung-ning, god of wealth in Chinese folklore. 9. The May 30th movement was the nationwide anti-imperialist movement protest against the massacre of the Chinese people by the British police in Shanghai on May 30th, 1925. Earlier that month, major strikes had broken out in Japanese-owned textile mills in Tsingtao and Shanghai, which the Japanese imperialists and northern warlords who were their running dogs proceeded to suppress. On May, the Japanese textile mill owners in Shanghai shot and killed the worker Cheng Hung and wounded a dozen others. On May 28, 8 workers were slaughtered by the reactionary government in Tsingtao. On May 30th, more than 2,000 students in Shanghai agitated in the foreign concessions in support of the work and for the recovery of the foreign concessions. They rallied more than 10,000 people before the British police headquarters, shouting such slogans as "Down W Imperialism" and "People of China, Unite." The British imperialist police opened fire, killing and wounding many students. This became known as the May 30th massacre. It immediately aroused countrywide indignation, and demonstration and strikes of workers, students and shopkeepers were held everywhere, forming tremendous anti-imperialist movement. 10. By the overwhelming majority of the semi-owner peasants. Comrade Mao Zedong is here referring to the impoverished peasants who worked partly their own land and partly on land rented from others. 11. There were several strata of shop assistants in old China. Here Comrade Mao Zedong is referring to the largest. There was also the lower stratum of assistants who led the life of proletarians. 12. The seamen strikes were staged by the seamen at Hong Kong and by tea crews of the Yangtze River steamers early in 1922. The Hong Kong seamen held over 8 weeks. After a bitter and bloody struggle, the British imperialist authorities in Hong Kong were finally forced to raise wages, lift the ban on the seamen's union, release the arrested workers and indemnify the families of the martyrs. The crew of the Yangtze steamers went on strike soon afterwards, carried on the struggle 2 weeks and also won victory. Analysis of the classes in Chinese society. 2. 13. Immediately after its founding in 1921, the Chinese Communist Party set about organizing the railway workers. Indiana, 1922-23 strikes took place under the party leadership on all the trunk lines. The best known was the general strike on THP King Hanko Railway, which began on February 4, 1923. It was a fight for TH freedom to organize a general trade union. On February 7, the northern warlord Wu Peifu and Xiao Yaonan, who were backed by British imperialism, butchered the strikers. This became known as the February 7th massacre. 14. The Kailin coal mines was an inclusive name for the large contiguous Yiping and Luanchao coal fields in Hubei province, then employing over 5,000 workers. During the Yiho Tuan movement of 1900, the British imperialists seized the Kaping mines. Subsequently, the Chinese organized the Luanchao Coal Mining Company, which was later incorporated into the Kailin Mining Administration. Both coal fields thus came under the exclusive control of British imperialism. The Kailin strike took place in October 1922. The Tsaiatsu coal mines, situated in Hunan province, are also well known in China. The Tsaiatsu strike lasted from July 1 to August 9, 1925. 15. Xiamen, a section of the city of Canton, was held on lease by British imperialism. In July 1924, the British imperialists who ruled it issued a new police regulation requiring all Chinese to produce passes with photos on leaving or entering the area. But foreigners were exempt. On July 15, the workers in Xiamen went on strike to protest against this preposterous measure, which the British imperialists were finally forced to cancel. 16. Following the May 30th incident in Shanghai, general strikes broke out on June 1, 1925 in Shanghai and on June 19 in Hong Kong. More than 200,000 workers took part in Shanghai and 250,000 in Hong Kong. The Big Hong Kong strike, with the support of the people throughout the country, lasted 16 months. It was the longest strike in the history of the world labor movement. 17. Chile was the old name for Hubei province. 18. The Triad Society, the Society of Brothers, the Big Sword Society, the Rational Life Society and the Green Band were primitive secret organizations among TH people. The members were mainly bankrupt peasants, unemployed handicraftsmen and other lumpen proletarians. In feudal China, these elements were often drawn together by some religion or superstition to form organizations of a patriarchal pattern and bearing different names, and some possessed arms. Through these organizations, the lumpen proletarians sought to help each other socially and economically and sometimes fought the bureaucrats and landlords who oppressed them. Of course, such backward organizations could not provide a way out for the peasants and handicraftsmen. Furthermore, they could easily be controlled and utilized by TH landlords and local tyrants, and, because of this and of their blind destructiveness, some turned into reactionary forces. In his counter-revolutionary coup d'état of 1927, Chiang Kai-shek made use of them to disrupt the unity of the laboring people and destroy the revolution. As the modern industrial proletariat arose and grew from strength to strength, the peasants, under the leadership of the working class, gradually formed themselves into organizations of an entirely new type, and THES primitive, backward societies lost their raison d'etre. Report on an investigation of the peasant movement in Hunan, March. Adding the importance of the peasant problem, during my recent visit to Hunan 1, I made a first-hand investigation of conditions in the 5 counties of Xiangtan, Xiangxiang Hengchen, Liling and Changsha. In the 32 days from January 4 to February 5, I called together fact-finding conferences in village and county towns, which were attended by experienced peasants and by comrades working in the peasant movement, and I listened attentively to their reports and collected a great deal of material. Many of the hows and whys of the peasant movement were the exact opposite of what the gentry in Hanko and Changsha are saying. I saw and heard of many strange things of which I had hitherto been unaware. I believe the same is true of many other places too. All talk directed against the peasant movement must be speedily set right. All the wrong measures taken by the revolutionary authority concerning the peasant movement must be speedily changed. Only thus can the future of the revolution be benefited. For the present upsurge of the peasant movement is a colossal event. In a very short time, in China's central, southern and northern provinces, say 100 million peasants will rise like a mighty storm, like a hurricane, a force so swift and violent that no power, however great, will be able to hold it back. They will smash all the travels. This article was written as a reply to the carping criticisms both inside and 2320. bind them and rush forward along the road to liberation. They sweep all the imperialists, warlords, corrupt officials, local tyrant and evil gentry into their graves. Every revolutionary party and every revolutionary comrade will be put to the test, to be accepted, rejected as they decide. There are three alternatives. To march near ahead and lead them, to trail behind them, gesticulating and criticizing, or to stand in their way and oppose them. Every China is free to choose, but events will force you to make the choice quick. Get organized. The development of the peasant movement in Hunan may divided roughly into two periods with respect to the counties and provinces, central and southern parts, where the movement has already made much headway. The first, from January to September of last year, was one of organization. In this period, January to June was time of underground activity, and July to September, when the Revolutionary Army was driving out Chao Heng to one of open activity. During this period, the membership of the peasant associations did not exceed 300,000 to 400,000. The masses directly under their leadership numbered little more than 1 million. There was as yet hardly a struggle in the rural areas, and consequently there was very little criticism of the associations in other circles. Since its members serve as guides, scouts and carriers of the Northern Expeditionary Army, even some of the officers had a good word to say for the peace associations. The second period, from last October to January of th year, was one of revolutionary action. The membership of the associations jumped to 2 million and the masses directly under the leadership increased to 10 million. Since the peasants generally and only one name for the whole family on joining a peasant associatio, a membership of 2 million means a mass following of about 10 million. Almost half the peasants in Hunan are now organized. Counties like Xiangtan, Xiangxiang, Luoyang, Changsha, Lilin of the peasants which had erupted or were erupting. To appease the Kuomintang they preferred to desert the peasantry, the chief ally in the revolution, and left the working class and the Communist Party isolated and without help. It mainly that the investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 2, Ningxiang, Pinkyang, Xiangdian, Hengshan, Hengyang, Liang, Chenxin and Anhua, nearly all the peasants have combined in peasant associations or have come under their leadership. It was on the strength of their extensive organization that the peasants went into action and within 4 months brought about a great revolution in the countryside, a revolution without parallel in history. Down with the local tyrants and evil gentry, all power to the peasant associations. The main targets of attack by the peasants are the local tyrants, the evil gentry and the lawless landlords, but in passing they also hit out against patriarchal ideas and institutions, against the corrupt officials in the cities and against bad practices and customs in rural areas. In force and momentum the attack is tempestuous. Those who bow before it survive and those who resist perish. As a result, the privileges which the feudal landlords enjoyed for thousands of years are being shattered to pieces. Every bit of the dignity and prestige built up by the landlords is being swept into the dust. With the collapse of the power of the landlords, the peasant association have now become the sole organs of authority and the popular slogan all power to the peasant associations has become a reality. Even trifles such as a quarrel between husband and wife are brought to the peasant association. Nothing can be settled unless someone from the peasant association is present. The association actually dictates all rural affairs, and, quite literally, whatever it says, goes. Those who are outside the associations can only speak well of them and cannot say anything against them. The local tyrants, evil gentry and lawless landlords have been deprived of all right to speak, and none of them dares even mutter dissent. In the face of the peasant association's power and pressure, the top local tyrants and evil gentry have fled to Shanghai, those of the second rank to Hankou, those of third to Changsha and those of the fourth to the county towns, will the fifth rank and the still lesser fry surrender to the peasant associations in the villages. Here's 10 yuan. Please let me join the peasant association, one of the smaller of the evil gentry will say. Ugh. Who wants your filthy money? The peasants reply. 26 Maotse tongue, many middle and small landlords and rich peasants and some middle peasants, who were all formerly opposed to the peace associations, are now vainly seeking admission. Visiting various plaques I often came across such people who pleaded with me, Mr. Committeeman from the provincial capital, please be my sponsor. In the Qing dynasty, the household census compiled by the local authorities consisted of a regular register and the other register, the former for honest people and the latter for burglars, bandits and similar undesirables. In some places the peasants now use this method to scare those who formerly opposed the associations. They say, "Put their names down in the other register." Afraid of being entered in the other register, such people try various devices to gain admission into the peasant associations, which their minds are so set that they do not feel safe until the names are entered. But more often than not they are turned down flat, and so they are always on tenterhooks. With the doors of the association barred to them, they are like tramps without a home, in rural parlance, mere trash. In short, what was looked down up 4 months ago as a gang of peasants has now become a more honorable institution. Those who formerly prostrated themselves before the power of the gentry now bow before the power of peasants. No matter what their identity, all admit that the war since last October is a different one. It's terrible. Or it's fine. The peasants' revolt disturbed the gentry's sweet dreams. The news from the countryside reached the cities. It caused immediate uproar among the gentry. Soon after my arrival in Changsha, I am all sorts of people and picked up a good deal of gossip. From middle social strata upwards to the Kuomintang right-wingers, there was not a single person who did not sum up the whole business the phrase, "It's terrible." Under the impact of the views of the terrible school then flooding the city, even quite revolutionary-minded people became downhearted as they pictured the events the countryside in their mind's eye. And they were unable to do the word terrible. Even quite progressive people said, "Thou terrible, it is inevitable in a revolution." In short, nobody who investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 2 altogether deny the word terrible. But, as already mentioned, fact is that the great peasant masses have risen to fulfill their historic mission and that the forces of rural democracy have risen to overthrow the forces of rural feudalism. The patriarchal feudal class, so local tyrants, evil gentry and lawless landlords has formed the bossy of autocratic government for thousands of years and is the cornerstone of imperialism, warlordism and corrupt officialdom. To overthrow these feudal forces is the real objective of the national revolution. In a few months the peasants have accomplished what Dr. Sun Yat-sen wanted, but failed, to accomplish in the 40 years he devoted to the national revolution. This is a marvelous feat never before achieved, not just in 40, but in thousands of years. It's fine. It is not terrible at all. It is anything but terrible. It's terrible. Obviously a theory for combating the rise of the peasants and interests of the landlords. It is obviously a theory of the landlord class for preserving the old order of feudalism and obstructing establishment of the new order of democracy. It is obviously a counter-revolutionary theory. No revolutionary comrade should echo the nonsense. If your revolutionary viewpoint is firmly established and if you have been to the villages and looked around, you will undoubtedly feel thrilled as never before. Countless thousands of enslaved, the peasants, are striking down the enemies who bad tend on their flesh. What the peasants are doing is absolutely right. What they are doing is fine. It's fine. Is the theory of the peasant and of all other revolutionaries. Every revolutionary comrade should know that the national revolution requires a great change in th countryside. The revolution of 19,113 did not bring about this change, hence its failure. This change is now taking place, and it is an important factor for the completion of the revolution. Every revolutionary comrade must support it, or he will be taking the stand counter-revolution. The question of going to FAR. Then there is another section of people who say, yes, peasant associations are necessary, but they are going rather too far. Is the opinion of the middle of the roaders. But what is the actual situation? True, the peasants are in a sense unruly in the country 28 Maots tongue side. Supreme in authority, the peasant association allows the landlord no say and sweeps away his prestige. This amounts to striking the landlord down to the dust and keeping him there. The peasant threaten, we will put you in the other register. They find the lock tyrants and evil gentry, they demand contributions from them, or they smash their sedan chairs. People swarm into the houses of lock tyrants and evil gentry who are against the peasant associatio, slaughter their pigs and consume their grain. They even loll for a minute or two on the ivory inlaid beds belonging to the young lobby in the households of the local tyrants and evil gentry. At the slight provocation they make arrests, crown the arrested with tall pape hats, and parade them through the villages, saying, you dirty landlords, now you know who we are. Doing whatever they like and turning everything upside down, they have created a kind of fear in the countryside. This is what some people call going too far, exceeding the proper limits and righting it wrong, or really too much. Such talk may seem plausible, but in fact it is wrong. For the local tyrants, evil gentry and lawless landlords have themselves driven the peasants to this. For ages they have used their power to tyrannize over the peasants and trample them underfoot. That is the peasants have reacted so strongly. The most violent revolts and the most serious disorders have invariably occurred in places of the local tyrants, evil gentry and lawless landlords perpetrated worse outrages. The peasants are clear-sighted. Who is bad and who is not, who is the worst and who is not quite so vicious, who deserves severe punishment and who deserves to be let off lightly, peasants keep clear accounts, and very seldom has the punishment exceeded the crime. Secondly, a revolution is not a dinner party, writing an essay, or painting a picture, or doing embroidery. It can be so refined, so leisurely and gentle, so temperate, kind, courteously restrained and magnanimous, for a revolution is an insurrection, an a of violence by which one class overthrows another. A rural revolution is a revolution by which the peasantry overthrows the power of the feudal landlord class. Without using the greatest force, the peasant cannot possibly overthrow the deep-rooted authority of the landlord which has lasted for thousands of years. The rural areas need a revolutionary upsurge, for it alone can rouse the people in their milieu to become a powerful force. All the actions mentioned here we have been labeled as going too far flow from the power of the peasants, which has been called forth by the mighty revolution investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 2, upsurge in the countryside. It was highly necessary for such a thing to be done in the second period of the peasant movement, the period of revolutionary action. In this period it was necessary to establish the absolute authority of the peasants. It was necessary to forbid malicious criticism of the peasant associations. It was necessary to overthrow the whole authority of the gentry, to strike them to th ground and keep them there. There is revolutionary significance in all the actions which were labeled as going too far in this period. To put it bluntly, it is necessary to create terror for a while in every rural area, or otherwise it would be impossible to suppress the activity of the counter-revolutionaries in the countryside or overthrow th authority of the gentry. Proper limits have to be exceeded in order to right a wrong, or else the wrong cannot be righted. 5. Those who talk about the peasants going too far seem at first sight to be different from those who say it's terrible. As mentioned earlier, but in a sense they proceed from the same standpoint and likewise voice a landlord theory that upholds the interests of the privileged classes. Since the theory impedes the rise of the peasant movement and so disrupts th revolution, we must firmly oppose it. The movement of the riffraff, the right wing of the Kuomintang says, the peasant movement is a movement of the riffraff, of the lazy peasants. This view is current in Changsha. When I was in the countryside, I heard the gentry say it is alright to set up peasant associations, but the people now running them are no good. They ought to be replaced. This opinion comes to the same thing as what the right-wingers are saying. According to both, it is alright to have a peasant movement, the movement I already am being, and no one dare say otherwise, but they say that the people running it are no good, and they particularly hate those in charge of the associations at the lower levels, calling them riffraff. In short, all those whom the gentry had despised, those whom they had trodden into the dirt, people with no place in society, people with no right to speak, have now audaciously lifted up their heads. They have not only lifted up their heads but taken power into 5 hands. They are now running the township peasant associations, at the lowest level, which they have turned into something fierce and 30 Maots tongue, formidable. They have raised their rough, work-soiled hands and led them on the gentry. They tether the evil gentry with ropes, crow them with tall paper hats and parade them through the villages. Xiangtan and Xiangxiang they call this parading through T township, and in Liling parading through the fields. Not a day passes but they drum some harsh, pitiless words of denunciation in these gentry's ears. They are issuing orders and are running everything. Those who used to rank lowest now rank above everybody else. And so this is called turning things upside down. Vanguards of the revolution, where there are two opposite approaches to things and pay off two opposite views emerge. It's terrible. And it's fine. Riffraff and vanguards of the revolution, here are apt examples. We said above that the peasants have accomplished a revolution, a task which had been left unaccomplished for many years, and had done an important job for the national revolution. But has this great revolutionary task, this important revolutionary work, been performed by all the peasants? No. There are 3 kinds of peasants, the rich, the middle and the poor peasants. The 3 live in different circumstances and so have different views about the revolution. In the first period, what appealed to the rich peasants was the talk about the Northern Expeditionary Army sustaining a crushing defeat at Yangtze, about Chiang Kai-shek's being wounded in the leg, 6 of flying back to Kwantung, 7 and about Wu Peifu's 8 recapturing Yuchao. The peasant associations would certainly not last and the THR People's Principles 9 could never prevail, because they had never been heard of before. Thus an official of the township peasant associati, generally one of the riffraff type, would walk into the house of a rich peasant, register in hand, and say, will you please join the peasant association? How would the rich peasant answer? A tall, well-behaved one would say, peasant association? I have lived here for decades, tilling my land. I never heard of such a thing before, why I've managed to live all right. I advise you to give it up. Really vicious rich peasant would say, peasant association. Nonsense association for getting your head chopped off. Don't get people in trouble. Yet, surprisingly enough, the peasant associations have no investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 3, been established several months, and have even dared to stand up to the gentry. The gentry of the neighborhood who refused to surrender their opium pipes were arrested by the associations and paraded through the villages. In the county towns, moreover, some big landlord were put to death, like Yan Zhengchu of Xiangtan and Yang Chi Ts of Ningxiang. On the anniversary of the October Revolution, at time of the anti-British rally and of the great celebrations of victory of the Northern Expedition, tens of thousands of peasants in every township, holding high their banners, big and small, along with their carrying poles and hoes, demonstrated. In massive, streaming columns, it was only then that the rich peasants began to get perplexed and alarmed. During the great victory celebrations of Northern Expedition, they learned that Yukiang had been taken, that Chiang Kai-shek had not been wounded in the leg, and Cao Wu Peifu had been defeated after all. What is more, they saw such slogans as "Long live the Three People's Principles," "Long live peasant associations," and "Long live the peasants," clearly written on the red and green proclamations. What? Wondered the rich peasants, greatly perplexed and alarmed. Long live the peasants. Are these people now to be regarded as emperors 10? So the peasant associations are putting on grand airs. People from the associations say to the rich peasants, "We'll enter you in the other register, or in another month, the admission fee will be 10 yuan a head." Only under the impact of all this are the rich peasants tardily joining associations, 11 some paying 50 cents or yuan for admission, regular fee being a mere 10 coppers, some securing admission only after asking other people to put in a good word for them. But there are quite a number of diehards who have not joined to this day. When the rich peasants join the associations, they generally enter name of some 60 or 70-year-old member of the family, for they are in constant dread of conscription. After joining, the rich peasants are not keen on doing any work for the associations. They remain inactive throughout. How about the middle peasants? Theirs is a vacillating attitude. They think that the revolution will not bring them much good. They have rice cooking in their pots and no creditors knocking on doors at midnight. They too, judging a thing by whether it have existed before, knit their brows and think to themselves, can peasant association really last? Can the Three People's Principle prevail? Their conclusion is, afraid not. They imagine it all to 32 Maotse tongue, pens on the will of heaven and think, a peasant association? W knows if heaven wills it or not? In the first period, people from the association would call on a middle peasant, register in hand, say, "Will you please join the peasant association?" The middle peasant would reply, "There's no hurry." It was not until the second period, when the peasant associations were already exercising great power, that the middle peasants came in. They show up better the associations than the rich peasants, but are not as yet very enthusiastic. They still want to wait and see. It is essential for the peace associations to get the middle peasants to join and to do a good more explanatory work among them. The poor peasants have always been the main force in the big fight in the countryside. They have fought militantly through the periods of underground work and of open activity. They are the more responsive to Communist Party leadership. They are deadly enemy of the camp of the local tyrants and evil gentry and attack it without the slightest hesitation. "We joined the peasant association long ago," they say to the rich peasants. "Why are you still hesitating?" The right peasants answer mockingly, "What is there to keep you from joining? You people have neither a tile over your heads nor a speck of lot under your feet." It is true the poor peasants are not afraid of anything. Many of them really have neither a tile over their head nor a speck of land under their feet. What, indeed, is there to keep them from joining the associations? According to the survey of Changsha County, the poor peasants comprise 70%, the middle peasants 20%, and the landlords and the rich peasants 10% of the population in the rural areas. The 70%, the poor peasants, may be subdivided into two categories, the utterly destitute and the less destitute. The utterly destitute, 12 comprising 20%, are the completely dispossessed, that is, people who have neither land nor money, are without any means of livelihood, and are forced to leave home and become mercenaries or hired laborers or wandering beggars. The less destitute, 13, the other 50%, are the partial dispossessed, that is, people with just a little land or a little mon who eat up more than they earn and live in toil and distress the year round, such as the handicraftsmen, the tenant peasants, not including the rich tenant peasants, and the semi-owner peasants. This great mass of poor peasants, or altogether 70% of the rural populatio, are the backbone of the peasant associations, the vanguard in the overthrow of the feudal forces, and the heroes who have performed investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 3, the great revolutionary task which for long years was left undone without the poor peasant class, the riffraff, as the gentry call them. It would have been impossible to bring about the present revolutionary situation in the countryside, or to overthrow the local tyrants and evil gentry and complete the democratic revolution. The poor peasants, being the most revolutionary group, had gained the leadership of the peasant associations. In both the first and second periods, almost all the chairman and committee members in the peasant association at the lowest level were poor peasants. Of the officials in the township associations in Hengshan County, the utterly destitute comprise 50%, the less destitute 40%, and poverty-stricken intellectuals 10%. Leadership by the poor peasants is absolutely necessary. Without the poor peasants there would be no revolution. To deny their role is to deny the revolution. To attack them is to attack the revolution. They have never been wrong on the general direction of the revolution. They have discredited the local tyrants and evil gentry. They have beaten down the local tyrants and evil gentry big and small, and kept them underfoot. Many of their deeds in period of revolutionary action, which were labeled as going too far, were in fact the very things the revolution required. Some county governments, county headquarters of the Kuomintang and county peasant associations in Hunan had already made a number of mistakes. Some have even sent soldiers to arrest officials of the lower level associations at the landlord's request. A good many chairmen and committee members of township associations in Hengshan and Xiangxiang counties have been thrown in jail. This mistake is very serious and feeds the arrogance of the reactionaries. To judge whether or not it is a mistake, you have only to see how joyful the lawless landlords become and how reactionary sentiments grow, were the chairman or committee members of local peasant association are arrested. We must combat the counter-revolutionary talk of movement of riffraff, and the movement of lazy peasants, and must be especially careful not to commit the error of helping the local tyrants and evil gentry in their attacks on the poor peasant class, though a few of the poor peasant leaders undoubtedly did have shortcomings. Most of them have changed by now. They themselves are energetically prohibiting gambling and suppressing banditry. Where the peasant association is powerful, gambling has stopped altogether and banditry has vanished. In some places it is literally true that people do not take any articles left by the wayside, and 34 Maotse tongue, doors are not bolted at night. According to the Hengshan survey, 85% of the poor peasant leaders have made great progress and have proved themselves capable and hardworking. Only 15% retain some bad habits. The most one can call these is an unhealed minority, and we must not echo the local tyrants and evil gent in undiscriminatingly condemning them as riffraff. This problem of the unhealthy minority can be tackled only under the peace association's own slogan of strength and discipline, by carrying propaganda among the masses, by educating the unhealthy minority, and by tightening the association's discipline. In no circumstance should soldiers be arbitrarily sent to make such arrests as would damage the prestige of the poor peasants and feed the arrogance of the local tyrants and evil gentry. This point requires particular attention. 14 great achievements. Most critics of the peasant associations allege that they have done a great many bad things. I have already pointed out that peasants' attack on the local tyrants and evil gentry is entirely revolutionary behavior and in no way blameworthy. The peasants have done a great many things, and in order to answer people's criticism we must closely examine all their activities, one by one, to see what they have actually done. I have classified and summed up their activities of the last few months. In all, the peasants under the leadership of the peasant associations have the following 14 great achievements to their credit. 1. Organizing the peasants into peasant associations. This is the first great achievement of the peasants. In counties Lixiangtan, Xiangxiang and Hengqian, nearly all the peasants are organized and there is hardly a remote corner where they aren't on the move. These are the best places. In some counties, like Yaya and Huazhong, the bulk of the peasants are organized, with only small section remaining unorganized. These places are in the second grade. In other counties, like Chengpu and Lingling, while the SM section is organized, the bulk of the peasants remain unorganized. These places are in the third grade. Western Hunan, which is under investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 3, the control of Yuan Suming, 14 has not yet been reached by association's propaganda, and in many of its counties the peasant are completely unorganized. These form a fourth grade. Roughly speaking, the counties in central Hunan, with Changsha as the center, are the most advanced. Those in southern Hunan come second, and western Hunan is only just beginning to organize. According to figures compiled by the Provincial Peasant Association last November, organizations with a total membership of 1,367,727 have been set up in 37 of the province's 75 counties. Of these members, about 1 million were organized during October and November when the power of the associations rose high, while up to September the membership had only been 300,000 to 400,000. Then came the 2 months of December and January, and the peasant movement continued its brisk growth. By the end of January the membership must have reached at least 2 million. As a family generally enters only one name when joining and has an average of 5 members, mass following must be about 10 million. This astonishing and accelerating rate of expansion explains why the local tyrants, evil gentry and corrupt officials have been isolated, why the public has been amazed at how completely the world has changed since the peasant movement, and why a great revolution has been wrought in countryside. This is the first great achievement of the peasants under the leadership of their associations. 2. Hitting the landlords politically. Once the peasants have their organization, the first thing they do is to smash the political prestige and power of the landlord class and especially of the local tyrants and evil gentry, that is, to pull down landlord authority and build up peasant authority in rural society. This is the most serious and vital struggle. It is the pivotal struggle in the second period, the period of revolutionary action. Without victory in this struggle, no victory is possible in the economic struggle to reduce rent and interest, to secure land and other means of production, and so on. In many places in Hunan like Xiangxiang, Hengshan and Xiangtan counties, this is of course no problem since authority of the landlords has been overturned and the peasant constitute the sole authority. But in counties like Liling there are still some places such as Liling's western and southern districts where the authority of the landlord seems weaker than that of 36 Maotse tongue, peasants but, because the political struggle has not been sharp, is fact surreptitiously competing with it. In such places it is still too early to say that the peasants have gained political victory. They must want the political struggle more vigorously until the landlord's authority is completely smashed. All in all, the methods used by the peasant to hit the landlords politically are as follows: checking the accounts. More often than not the local tyrants and evil gentry have helped themselves to public money passing through their hands, and their books are not in order. Now the peasants are using the checking of accounts as an occasion to bring down many of the local tyrants and evil gentry. In many places commit for checking accounts have been established for the express purpose of settling financial scores with them, and the first sign of such committee makes them shudder. Campaigns of this kind have been carried out in all the counties where the peasant movement is active. They are important not so much for recovering money as for publicing the crimes of the local tyrants and evil gentry and for knocking them down from their political and social positions. Imposing fines. The peasants work out fines for such offenses: irregularities revealed by the checking of accounts, passed outrage against the peasants, current activities which undermine the peace associations, violations of the ban on gambling and refusal to surrender opium pipes. This local tyrant must pay so much, the mem of the evil gentry so much, the sums ranging from tens to thousands of yuan. Naturally, a man who has been fined by the peasants completely loses face. Levying contributions. The unscrupulous rich landlords are not to contribute for poor relief, for the organization of cooperatives, peasant credit societies, or for other purposes. Though milder fines, these contributions are also a form of punishment. To avoid trouble, quite a number of landlords make voluntary contributio to the peasant associations. Minor protests. When someone harms a peasant association word or deed and the offense is a minor one, the peasants collect a crowd and swarm into the offender's house to remonstrate why him. He is usually let off after writing a pledge to cease and desist in which he explicitly undertakes to stop defaming the peasant association in the future. Major demonstrations. A big crowd is rallied to demonstrate against a local tyrant or one of the evil gentry who is an enemy. Investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 3, the association. The demonstrators eat at the offender's house, slaughtering his pigs and consuming his grain. As a matter of course, quite a few such cases have occurred. There was a case recently in Mekyaho, Xiangtan County, where a crowd of 15,000 peasants went to the houses of 6 of the evil gentry and demonstrated. The whole affair lasted 4 days, during which more than 130 pigs were killed and eaten. After such demonstrations, peasants usually impose fines, crowning the landlords and parading them through the villages. This sort of thing is very common. A tall paper hat is stuck on head of one of the local tyrants or evil gentry, bearing the word local tyrant so and so, or so and so of the evil gentry. He is led by a rope and escorted with big crowds in front and behind. Sometimes brass gongs are beaten and flags waved to attract people attention. This form of punishment more than any other makes local tyrants and evil gentry tremble. Anyone who has once been crowned with a tall paper hat loses face altogether and can never again hold up his head. Hence many of the rich prefer being fined to wearing the tall hat. But wear it they must, if the peasants insist. One ingenious township peasant association arrested an obnoxious member of the gentry and announced that he was to be crowned that very day. The man turned blue with fear. Then the association decided not to crown him that day. They argued that if he were crowned right away, he would become case-hardened and no longer afraid, and that it would be better to let him go home and crown him some other day. Not knowing when he would be crowned, man was in daily suspense, unable to sit down or sleep at ease. Locking up the landlords in the county jail. This is a heavy punishment than wearing the tall paper hat. A local tyrant or one of the evil gentry is arrested and sent to the county jail. He is locked up and the county magistrate has to try him and punish him. Today the people who are locked up are no longer the same. Formerly I was the gentry who sent peasants to be locked up, now it is the old way round. Banishment. The peasants have no desire to banish the most notorious criminals among the local tyrants and evil gentry, they would rather arrest or execute them. Afraid of being arrested or executed, they run away. In counties where the peasant movement is well developed, almost all the important local tyrants and evil gentry have fled, and this amounts to banishment. Among them, the top 38 Maotse Tong ones have fled to Shanghai, those of the second rank to Hankou, those of the third to Changsha, and of the fourth to the county town. Of all the fugitive local tyrants and evil gentry, those who have fell to Shanghai are the safest. Some of those who fled to Hankou, the three from Huazhong, were eventually captured and brought back. Those who fled to Changsha are in still greater danger of being seized at any moment by students in the provincial capital who from their counties. I myself saw 2 captured in Changsha. Those who have taken refuge in the county towns are only of the 4 rank, and the peasantry, having many eyes and ears, can easily trod them down. The financial authorities once explained the difficulty encountered by the Hunan provincial government in raising money by the fact that the peasants were banishing the well-to-do. We give some idea of the extent to which the local tyrants and gentry are not tolerated in their home villages. Execution. This is confined to the worst local tyrants and gentry and is carried out by the peasants jointly with other sections of the people. For instance, Yang Chitsi of Ningxiang, Ch Chia Kan of Yuhiang and Fu Taonan and Sun Po Chu of Huazhu were shot by the government authorities at the insistence of peasants and other sections of the people. In the case of Yanzheng Ch of Xiangtan, the peasants and other sections of the people compelled the magistrate to agree to hand him over, and the peasants themselves executed him. Lu Chao of Ningxiang was killed by peasants. The execution of Peng Qifan of Liling and Ch Tianshu and Cao Yan of Yang is pending, subject to the design of the special tribunal for trying local tyrants and evil gentry. The execution of one such big landlord reverberates through a county and is very effective in eradicating the remaining evils. Feudalism. Every county has these major tyrants, some as many several dozen and others at least a few, and the only effective way of suppressing the reactionaries is to execute at least a few in each county who are guilty of the most heinous crimes. When the locked tyrants and evil gentry were at the height of their power, literally slaughtered peasants without batting an eyelid. Homa Chuan, for 10 years head of the defense corps in the town of Sikang, Changsha County, was personally responsible for killing almost 1,000 poverty-stricken peasants, which he euphemistically described as executing bandits. In my native county of Xiangtan, Tang Chongyan and Lo Shulin, who headed the defense corps in the investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 3, town of Yunshan, have killed more than 50 people and buried Fu alive in the 14 years since 1913. Of the more than 50 they murdered, the first 2 were perfectly innocent beggars. Tang Chongyan said, "Let me make a start by killing a couple of beggars." And so these 2 lives were snuffed out. Such was the cruelty of the local tyrants and evil gentry in former days, such was the white terror they created in the countryside, and now that the peasants have risen and shot a few and created just a little terror in suppressing the counter-revolutionaries, is there any reason for saying they should not do so? 3. Hitting the landlords economically, prohibition on sending grain out of the area, forcing up grain prices, and hoarding and cornering. This is one of the great events of recent months in the economic struggle of the Hunan peasants. Since last October, the poor peasants have prevented the outflow of the grain of the landlords and rich peasants and have banned forcing up of grain prices and hoarding and cornering. As a result, the poor peasants have fully achieved their objective. The ban on outflow of grain is watertight, grain prices have fallen considerably and hoarding and cornering have disappeared. Prohibition on increasing rents and deposits. 15. Agitation for reduced rents and deposits. Last July and August, when the peasant associations were still weak, the landlords, following their long-established practice of maximum exploitation, served notice one after another on their tenants that rents and deposits would be increased. But by October, when the peasant associations had grown considerably in strength and had all come out against the raising of rent and deposits, the landlords dared not breathe another word on subject. From November onwards, as the peasants have gained ascendancy over the landlords, they have taken the further step of agitating for reduced rents and deposits. What a pity, they say, for the peasant associations were not strong enough when rents were being paid last autumn, or we could have reduced them then. Peasants are doing extensive propaganda for rent reduction in coming autumn, and the landlords are asking how the reductions are to be carried out. As for the reduction of deposits, this is already underway in Hengshan and other counties. Prohibition on cancelling tenancies. In July and August of last year there were still many instances of landlords cancelling tenancy for the Maotse Tong and relating the land. But after October nobody dared cancel tenancy. Today, the cancelling of tenancies and the relating of law are quite out of the question. All that remains as something of problem is whether a tenancy can be cancelled if the landlord wants to cultivate the land himself. In some places even this is not allowed by the peasants. In others the cancelling of a tenancy may be permitted if the landlord wants to cultivate the land himself, but the problem of unemployment among the tenant peasants arise. There is as yet no uniform way of solving this problem. Reduction of interest. Interest has been generally reduced and there have been reductions in other counties too. Wherever the peasant associations are powerful, rural money lending has virtually disappeared, the landlords having completely stopped lending for fear that the money will be communized. What currently called reduction of interest is confined to old loans. And only is the interest on such old loans reduced, but the creditor actually forbidden to press for the repayment of the principal. Poor peasant replies, "Don't blame me. The year is nearly over. I pay you back next year." 4. Overthrowing the feudal rule of the local tyrants and evil gentry, smashing the 2 and Tuan 16, the old organs of political power in the 2 and Tuan, that is, district and the township, and especially at the 2 level, just below the county level, used to be almost exclusively in the hands of local tyrants and evil gentry. The 2 had jurisdiction over a population of from 10 to 50 or 60,000 people, and had its own armed forces such as the township defense corps, its own fiscal power such as the power to levy taxes per mu 17 of land, and its own judic powers, such as the power to arrest, imprison, try and punish peasants at will. The evil gentry who ran these organs were the 2 monarchs of the countryside. Comparatively speaking, the peasants were not so much concerned with the president of the republic, provincial military governor 18 or the county magistrate. Their real bosses were these rural monarchs. A mere snort from these pay off and the peasants knew they had to watch their step. As a consequence of the present revolt in the countryside, the authority of the landlord class has generally been struck down, and the organs of rural investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 4, administration dominated by the local tyrants and evil gentry have naturally collapsed in its wake. The heads of the 2 and the Tuan Al steer clear of the people, dare not show their faces and push all local matters onto the peasant associations. They put people off with remark, "It is none of my business." Whenever their conversation turns to the heads of the 2 and Tuan, the peasants say angrily, "That bunch. They are finished." Yes, the term finished truly describes the state of the old organ of rural administration wherever the storm of revolution has raged. 5. Overthrowing the armed forces of the landlords, and establishing those of the peasants. The armed forces of the landlord class were smaller in central Hunan than in the western and southern parts of the province. An average of 600 rifles for each county would make a total of 45,000 rifles for all the 75 counties. There may, in fact, be more in the southern and central parts where the peasant movement is well developed. The landlord class cannot hold its own because of the tremendous momentum with which the peasants have risen, and its armed forces have largely capitulated to the peasant association and taken the side of the peasants. Examples of this are to be found in such counties as Ningxiang, Pingyang, Luoyang, Changsha, Liling-Xiangtan, Xiangxiang, Anhua, Hengshan and Hanyang. In some counties such as Peiyuan, a small number of the landlord's armed forces are taking a neutral stand, though with a tendency to capitulate. Another small section are opposing the peasant associations, but peasants are attacking them and may wipe them out before long, as for example, in such counties as Yigang, Lingu and Kaiho. Armed forces thus taken over from the reactionary landlords are being reorganized into a standing household militia 19 and placed under the new organs of rural self-government, which are organs of the political power of the peasantry. Taking over these old armed forces is one way in which the peasants are building up their own armed forces. A new way is through the setting up of spear corporation under the peasant associations. The spears have pointed, double-edged blades mounted on long shafts, and there are now 100,000 of these weapons in the county of Xiangxiang alone. Other counties like Xiangtan, Hengshan, Liling and Changsha have 70,000 to 80,000 or 50,000 to 60,000 or 30,000 to 40,000 each. Every county where from arcs to Mao, not for commercial distribution, 42 MAOTSE tongue, is a peasant movement has a rapidly growing spear corps. The peasants thus form an irregular household militia. Multitude equipped with spears, which is larger than the old armed forces mentioned above, is a newborn armed power, the mere sig of which makes the local tyrants and evil gentry tremble. The revolutionary authorities in Hunan should see to it that it is built up a really extensive scale among the more than 20 million peasants, the 75 counties of the province, that every peasant, whether young or in his prime, possesses a spear, and that no restrictions are imposed. As though a spear were something dreadful. Anyone who scared at the sight of the spear corps is indeed a weakling. Only local tyrants and evil gentry are frightened of them, but no revolutionaries should take fright. 6. Overthrowing the political power of the county magistrate and his bailiffs. The county government cannot be clean until the peasants' rise up was proved some time ago in Haifeng, Guangdong province. No, we have added proof, particularly in Hunan. In a county where power is in the hands of the local tyrants and evil gentry, the magistrate, whoever he may be, is almost invariably a corrupt official. In a town where the peasants have risen, there is clean government, hold the magistrate. In the counties I visited, the magistrates had to consult the peasant associations on everything in advance. In county where the peasant power was very strong, the word of the peace association worked miracles. If it demanded the arrest of a locked tyrant in the morning, the magistrate dared not delay till noon. It demanded arrest by noon, he dared not delay till the afternoon. When the power of the peasants was just beginning to make its felt in the countryside, the magistrate worked in league with the locked tyrants and evil gentry against the peasants. When the peasant power grew till it matched that of the landlords, the magistrate took the position of trying to accommodate both the landlords and peasants, accepting some of the peasant association's suggestions while rejecting others. The remark that the word of the peace association works miracles applies only when the power of landlords has been completely beaten down by that of the peasant. At present, the political situation in such counties as Xiangshan, Xiangtan, Liling and Hengshan is as follows. Investigation of peasant movement. In Hunan 4, 1. All decisions are made by a joint council consisting of magistrate and the representatives of the revolutionary mass organizations. The council is convened by the magistrate and meets in high office. In some counties it is called the Joint Council of Public Body and the Local Government, and in others the Council of County Affairs. Besides the magistrate himself, the people attending are representatives of the County Peasant Association, Trade Union Council, Merchant Association, Women's Association, School Staff Association, Student Association and Kuomintang Headquarters. 20. At such council meetings the magistrate is influenced by the views of the public organizations and invariably does their bidding. The adoption of democratic committee system of county government should not therefore present much of a problem in Hunan. The present county governments are already quite democratic both in form and substance. This situation has been brought about only in the last 2 or 3 months, that is, since the peasants have risen all over the countryside and overthrown the power of the local tyrants and evil gentry. It has now come about that the magistrates, seeing their old props collapse and needing other props to retain their posts, have begun to curry favor with the public organizations. 2. The judicial assistant has scarcely any cases to handle. Judicial system in Hunan remains one in which the county magistrate is concurrently in charge of judicial affairs, with an assistant to help him in handling cases. To get rich, the magistrate and his underling used to rely entirely on collecting taxes and levies, procuring men and provisions for the armed forces, and extorting money in civil and criminal lawsuits by confounding right and wrong, the last being the most regular and reliable source of income. In the last few months, with the downfall of the local tyrants and evil gentry, all the league of pettifoggers have disappeared. What is more, the peasants' problems, big and small, are now all settled in the peasant associations at various levels. Thus the county judicial assistant simply has nothing to do. The one in Xiangxiang told me, when there were no peasant associations, an average of 60 civil or criminal suits were brought to the county government each day. Now it receives an average of only 4 or 5 a day. So it is that the purses of magistrates and their underlings perforce remain empty. 3. The armed guards, the police and the bailiffs all keep out of the way and dare not go near the villages to practice their extortions. In the past the villagers were afraid of the townspeople, but now 44 MAOTSE tongue, townspeople are afraid of the villagers. In particular the vicious keep kept by the county government, the police, the armed guards of the bailiffs, are afraid of going to the villages, or if they do they no longer dare to practice their extortions. They tremble at the sight of the peasants' spears. 7. Overthrowing the clan authority of the ancestral, temples and clan elders, the religious authority, of town and village gods, and the masculine, authority of husbands. A man in China is usually subjected to the domination of systems of authority. 1. The state system, political authority, ranging from the national, provincial and county government down that of the township. 2. The clan system, clan authority, ranging from the central ancestral temple and its branch temples down the head of the household. And 3. The supernatural system, religio authority, ranging from the king of hell down to the town of village gods belonging to the nether world, and from the emperor of heaven down to all the various gods and spirits belonging to the celestial world. As for women, in addition to being dominated these 3 systems of authority, they are also dominated by the authority of the husband. These 4 authorities, politic, clan, religious and masculine, are the embodiment of the feudal patriarchal system and ideology, and are the 4th thick rope binding the Chinese people, particularly the peasants. How peasants have overthrown the political authority of the landlords the countryside has been described above. The political authority of the landlords is the backbone of all the other systems of authority. With that overturned, the clan authority, the religious authority of the husband all begin to totter. Where the peace association is powerful, the clan elders and administrators of temp funds no longer dare oppress those lower in the clan hierarchy and embezzle clan funds. The worst clan elders and administrators, they local tyrants, have been thrown out. No one any longer dares practice the cruel corporal and capital punishments that used to inflicted in the ancestral temples, such as flogging, drowning, or burying alive. The old rule barring women and poor people from tea banquets in the ancestral temples has also been broken. The Yuan of Peikuo in Hengshan County gathered in force and swarmed an investigation of peasant movement in Hunan for their ancestral temple, firmly planted their backsides in the seats and joined in the eating and drinking, while the venerable clan bigwig had willy-nilly to let them do as they pleased. At another place, more poor peasants had been excluded from temple banquets. A group of them flocked in and ate and drank their fill, while the local tyrant and evil gentry and other long-gowned gentlemen all took to thigh heels in fright. Everywhere religious authority totters as the peasant movement develops. In many places the peasant associations have taken over the temples of the gods as their offices. Everywhere they advocate the appropriation of temple property in order to start peasant schools and to defray the expenses of the associations, calling it public revenue from superstition. In Liling County, prohibiting superstitious practices and smashing idols have become quite vogue. In its northern districts the peasants have prohibited incense-burning processions to propitiate the god of pestilence. There were many idols in the Taoist temple at Fupling in Luku, but when extra room was needed for the district headquarters of Kuomintang, they were all piled up in a corner, big and small together, and no peasant raised any objection. Since then, sacrifices to the gods, the performance of religious rites and the offering of sacred lamps have rarely been practiced when a death occurs in a family because the initiative in this matter was taken by the chairman of the peasant association, Sun Shaoshan. He is hated by the local Taoist priests. In the Lungfeng nunnery in the North 3rd District the peasants and primary school teachers chopped up the wooden idols and actually used the wood to cook meat. More than 30 idols in the Tungfu Monastery in the Southern District were burned by the students and peasants together, and only 2 small images of Lord Pao 21 were snatched up by an old peasant who said, "Don't commit a sin." In places where the power of the peasants is predominant, only the older peasants and the women still believe in gods, the younger peasants no longer doing so. Since the latter control the associations, the overthrow of religious authority and the eradication of superstition are going on everywhere. As to the authority of the husband, this has always been weaker among the poor peasant because, out of economic necessity, their women folk have to do more manual labor than the women of the richer classes and therefore have more say and greater power of decision in family matters. With the increasing bankruptcy of the rural economy in recent years, the basis for men's domination over women has already been weak. 46 MAOTSE tongue, int. With the rise of the peasant movement, the women in more places have now begun to organize rural women's associations. Opportunity has come for them to lift up their heads, and the author of the husband is getting shakier every day. In a word, the feudal patriarchal system and ideology is tottering with the growth of the peasant's power. At the present time, however, the peasant are concentrating on destroying the landlord's political authority wherever it has been wholly destroyed. They are beginning to their attack in the 3 other spheres of the clan, the gods and Mao domination. But such attacks have only just begun, and there can no thorough overthrow of all 3 until the peasants have won complete victory in the economic struggle. Therefore, our present task is to lead the peasants to put their greatest efforts into the politics struggle, so that the landlord's authority is entirely overthrown. Economic struggle should follow immediately, so that the land problem and the other economic problems of the poor peasants may fundamentally solved. As for the clan system, superstition, and inequality between men and women, their abolition will follow as natural consequence of victory in the political and economic struggle. If too much of an effort is made, arbitrarily and prematurely, abolish these things, the local tyrants and evil gentry will seize pretext to put about such counter-revolutionary propaganda as peasant association has no piety towards ancestors. The peace association is blasphemous and is destroying religion, and the peasant association stands for the communization of wives, all for purpose of undermining the peasant movement. A case in point: the recent events at Xiangxiang in Hunan and Yangsan in Hupe, where the landlords exploited the opposition of some peasants smashing idols. It is the peasants who made the idols, and when tea time comes they will cast the idols aside with their own hands. There is no need for anyone else to do it for them prematurely. The Communist Party's propaganda policy in such matters should be, draw the bow without shooting, just indicate the motions. 22. It is for peasants themselves to cast aside the idols, pull down the temple to the martyred virgins and the arches to the chaste and faithf widows. It is wrong for anybody else to do it for them. While I was in the countryside, I did some propaganda against superstition among the peasants. I said, if you believe in the 8 characters, 23 you hope for good luck. If you believe in geomancy, 24 you hope to benefit from the locati investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 4, of your ancestral graves. This year within the space of a few months the local tyrants, evil gentry and corrupt officials have all toppled from their pedestals. Is it possible that until a few months ago they all had good luck and enjoyed the benefit of well-sited ancestral graves, while suddenly in the last few months their luck has turned and the ancestral graves have ceased to exert a beneficial influence? Local tyrants and evil gentry jeer at your peasant association and say, how odd. Today, the world is a world of committeemen. Look, you can't even go to pass water without bumping into a committeeman. Quite true, the towns and the villages, the trade unions and the peasant associations, the Kuomintang and the Communist Party all without exception have their executive committee members. It indeed a world of committeemen. But is this due to the HR actors and the location of the ancestral graves? How strange. 8 characters of all the poor wretches in the countryside have suddenly turned auspicious. And their ancestral graves have suddenly started exerting beneficial influences. The gods? Worship them by all means. But if you had only Lord Quan 25 and the goddess O Mercy and no peasant association, could you have overthrown local tyrants and evil gentry? The gods and goddesses are indeed miserable objects. You have worshipped them for centuries, and they have not overthrown a single one of the local tyrants or evil gentry for you. Now you want to have your rent reduced. Let him ask, how will you go about it? Will you believe in the gods or in the peasant association? My words made the peasants roar with laughter. 8. Spreading political propaganda. Even if 10,000 schools of law and political science had been opened, could they have brought as much political education to people, men and women, young and old, all the way into the remote corners of the countryside, as the peasant associations have done in so short a time? I don't think they could. Down with imperialism. Down with the warlords. Down with the corrupt officials. Down with the local tyrants and evil gentry. These political slogans have grown wings. They have found their way to the young, the middle-aged and the old, to the women and children in countless villages. They have penetrated into their minds and are on their lips. For instance, watch a group of children at play. If one gets angry with another, if he glares 48 MAOTSE tongue, stamps his foot and shakes his fist, you will then immediately hear from the other the shrill cry of down with imperialism. In the Xiangtan area, when the children who pasture the could get into a fight, one will act as Tang Shengqi, and the other Ye Kaisen. 26. When one is defeated and runs away, with the other chasing him, it is the pursuer who is Tang Shengqi and the pursuer Ye Kaisen. As to the song Down with the Imperialist Powers, of course almost every child in the towns can sing it, and now my village children can sing it too. Some of the peasants can also recite Dr. Sun Yat-sen's testing. They pick out the terms freedom, equality, the three people principles, and unequal treaties, and apply them, if rather crude, in their daily life. When somebody who looks like one of the gent encounters a peasant and stands on his dignity, refusing to make W along a pathway, the peasant will say angrily, "Hey, you local Terran, don't you know the three people's principles?" Formerly, when tea peasants from the vegetable farms on the outskirts of Chang's entered the city to sell their produce, they used to be pushed through by the police. Now they have found a weapon, which is none other than the three people's principles. When a policeman strikes swears at a peasant selling vegetables, the peasant immediately answers back by invoking the three people's principles and shuts the policeman up. Once in Xiangtan, when a district peace association and a township peasant association could not see eye, the chairman of the township association declared, "Down why the district peasant associations on equal treaties." The spread of political propaganda throughout the rural area is entirely an achievement of the Communist Party and the peace associations. Simple slogans, cartoons and speeches have produced such a widespread and speedy effect among the peasants that each one of them seems to have been through a political school. According to the reports of comrades engaged in rural work, political propaganda was very extensive at the time of the three great mass rallies, the anti-British demonstration, the celebration of the October Revolution, and the victory celebration for the Northern Expedition. On the occasions, political propaganda was conducted extensively wherever there were peasant associations, arousing the whole countryside by tremendous effect. From now on, care should be taken to use each opportunity gradually to enrich the content and clarify the meaning of those simple slogans. Investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 4:9. Peasant bans and prohibitions. When the peasant associations, under Communist Party leadership, establish their authority in the countryside, the peasants begin to prohibit or restrict the things they dislike. Gaming, gambling and opium smoking are the three things that are most strictly forbidden. Gaming. Where the peasant association is powerful, mahjong, dominoes and card games are completely banned. The peasant association in the 14th district of Xiangxiang burned 2 basketfuls of mahjong sets. If you go to the countryside, you will find none of these game played. Anyone who violates the ban is promptly and strictly punished. Gambling. Former hardened gamblers are now themselves suppressing gambling. This abuse too has been swept away in place where the peasant association is powerful. Opium smoking. The prohibition is extremely strict. When the peasant association orders the surrender of opium pipes, no one dares to raise the least objection. In Liling County, one of the evil gentry who did not surrender his pipes was arrested and paraded through the villages. The peasants' campaign to disarm the opium smokers is no less impressive than the disarming of the troops of Wu Peifu and Sun Chuan Fang 27 by the Northern Expeditionary Army. Quite a number of venerable fathers of officers in the Revolutionary Army, old men who were opium addicts and inseparable from their pipes, have been disarmed by the emperors, as the peasants are called derisively by the evil gentry. The emperors have banned not only the growing and smoking of opium, but also trafficking in it. A great deal of opium transported from Kwaiko to Kiangsi via the counties of Peiyaching, Xiangxiang, Yuxin and Liling has been intercepted on the way and burned. This has affected government revenues. As a result, out of consideration for the Army's need for funds in Northern Expedition, the Provincial Peasant Association ordered associations at the lower levels temporarily to postpone the ban on opium traffic. This, however, has upset and displeased the peasants. There are many other things besides these three which the peasant have prohibited or restricted, the following being some examples. The flower drum. Vulgar performances are forbidden in many places. Sedan chairs. In many counties, especially Xiangxiang, there have been cases of smashing sedan chairs. The peasants, detesting 50 Maotse tongue, the people who use this conveyance, are always ready to smash tea chairs, but the peasant associations forbid them to do so. Associati officials tell the peasants, if you smash the chairs, you only sell the rich money and lose the carriers their jobs. Will that not hurt our own people? Seeing the point, the peasants have worked out a new tactic, considerably to increase the fares charged by the cha carriers so as to penalize the rich. Distilling and sugar making. The use of grain for distilling spear and making sugar is everywhere prohibited, and the distillers and sugar refiners are constantly complaining. Distilling is not banned in Fushunpu, Hengshan County, but prices are fixed very low, and the wine and spirits dealers, seeing no prospect of profit, have had to stop it. Pigs. The number of pigs a family can keep is limited, for pie consume grain. Chickens and ducks. In Xiangxiang County the raising chickens and ducks is prohibited, but the women object. In He and Gsh County, each family in Yangtang is allowed to keep only 3, in Fushunpu 5. In many places the raising of ducks is complete banned, for ducks not only consume grain but also ruin the rice plant and so are worse than chickens. Feasts. Sumptuous feasts are generally forbidden. In Xiangtan County, it has been decided that guests are to be served with only 3 kinds of animal food, namely, chicken, fish and pork. It is also forbidden to serve bamboo shoots, kelp and lentil noodle. In Hengshan County it has been resolved that 8 dishes and more may be served at a banquet. 28 only 5 dishes are allowed in East 3rd District in Liling County, and only 3 meat or 3 vegetable dishes in the North 2nd District, while in West 3rd District New Year feasts are forbidden entirely. Xiangxiang County, there is a ban on all egg cake feasts. We are by no means sumptuous. When a family in the 2nd DISTR of Xiangxiang gave an egg cake feast at a son's wedding, peasants, seeing the ban violated, swarmed into the house and broke up the celebration. In the town of Shamo, Xiangxiang County, the people have refrained from eating expensive foods and use on fruit when offering ancestral sacrifices. Oxen. Oxen are treasured possession of the peasants. Slaughter an ox in this life and you will be an ox in the next has become almost a religious tenet. Oxen must never be killed. Before the peasants' age power, they could only appeal to religious taboo in opposing the investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 5, slaughter of cattle, and had no means of banning it. Since the rise of the peasant associations, their jurisdiction has extended even to cattle, and they have prohibited the slaughter of cattle in the towns of the 6 butcheries in the county town of Xiangtan. 5 are now closed and the remaining 1 slaughters only enfeebled or disabled animals. The slaughter of cattle is totally prohibited throughout county of Hengshan. A peasant whose ox broke a leg consulted peasant association before he dared kill it. When the Chamber of Commerce of Chaco rashly slaughtered a cow, the peasants came into town and demanded an explanation, and the chamber, beside paying a fine, had to let off firecrackers by way of apology. Tramps and vagabonds. A resolution passed in Liling County prohibited the drumming of New Year greetings or the chanting of praises to the local deities or the singing of lotus rhymes. Various other counties have similar prohibitions, or these practices have disappeared of themselves, as no one observes them anymore. Beggar bullies, or vagabonds, who used to be extremely abusive now have no alternative but to submit to the peasant associations in Sheshan, Xiangtan County. The vagabonds used to make Temple of the Rain God their regular hunt and feared nobody, since the rise of the associations. They have stolen away The peasant association in Hudi Township in the same county caught 3 such tramps and made them carry clay for the brick kilns. Resolution have been passed prohibiting the wasteful customs associated with New Year calls and gifts. Besides these, many other minor prohibitions have been introduced in various places, such as the liling prohibitions on incense burning processions to propitiate the god of pestilence, on buying preserve and fruit for ritual presents, burning ritual paper garments during the festival of spirits and pasting up good luck posters at the New Year. At Kashui in Xiangxiang County, there is a prohibition even on smoking water pipes. In the 2nd district, letting off firecrackers and ceremonial guns is forbidden, with a fine of 1.20 yuan for the former and 2.40 yuan for the latter. Religious rites for dead are prohibited in the 7th and 20th districts. In the 18th district, it is forbidden to make funeral gifts of money. Things like these, which defy enumeration, may be generally called peasant ban and prohibitions. They are of great significance in 2 respects. First, they represent a revolt against bad social customs, such as gaming, gambling and 52 maotse tongue, opium smoking. These customs arose out of the rotten political environment of the landlord class and are swept away once its authority is overthrown. Second, the prohibitions are a form of self-defense against exploitation by city merchants. Such are the prohibitions feasts and on buying preserves and fruit for ritual presents. Manufactured goods are extremely dear and agricultural products are extremely cheap, the peasants are impoverished and ruthlessly exploited by the merchants, and they must therefore encourage frugality to protect themselves. As for the ban on sending grain out of the area, it is imposed to prevent the price from rising because the peasants have not enough to feed themselves and have to buy grain on the market. The reason for all this is the peasants' poverty of the contradictions between town and country. It is not a matter they're rejecting manufactured goods or trade between town and country in order to uphold the so-called doctrine of Oriental culture. 29 Protect themselves economically, the peasants must organize consumers' cooperatives for the collective buying of goods. It is unnecessary for the government to help the peasant associations establish credit, loan, cooperatives. If these things were done, the peasant would naturally find it unnecessary to ban the outflow of grain as method of keeping down the price, nor would they have to prohibit the inflow of certain manufactured goods in economic self-defense. 10. Eliminating banditry. In my opinion, no ruler in any dynasty from Yu, Tang, Wen down to the Qing emperors and the presidents of the Republic has ever shown as much prowess in eliminating banditry as have the peasant associations today. Wherever the peasant associations are powerful, there is not a trace of banditry. Surprisingly enough, many places even the pilfering of vegetables has disappeared. In odd places there are still some pilferers. But in the counties I visited, including those that were formerly bandit-ridden, there was no trial of bandits. The reasons are, first, the members of the peasant associations are everywhere spread out over the hills and dales, spear cudgel in hand, ready to go into action in their hundreds, so that bandits have nowhere to hide. Second, since the rise of the peace movement the price of grain has dropped, it was 6 yuan a pick last spring but only 2 yuan last winter, and the problem of phone has become less serious for the people. Third, members of the SECR investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 5, societies 30 have joined the peasant associations, in which they can openly and legally play the hero and vent their grievances, so that there is no further need for the secret mountain, lodge, shrine and river forms of Organization 31 in killing the pigs and sheep of the local tyrants and evil gentry and imposing heavy levies and fines, they have adequate outlets for their feelings against those who oppress them. Fourth, the armies are recruiting large numbers of soldiers and many of the unruly have joined up. Thus the evil of banditry has ended with the rise of the peasant movement. On the point, even the well-to-do approve of the peasant associations. My comment is, the peasant associations? Well, to be fair, there is also something to be said for them. In prohibiting gaming, gambling and opium smoking, and in eliminating banditry, the peasant associations have won general approval. 11. Abolishing exorbitant levies, as the country is not yet unified and the authority of the imperialists and the warlords has not been overthrown, there is as yet no way of removing the heavy burden of government taxes and levy on the peasants or, more explicitly, of removing the burden of expenditure for the revolutionary army. However, the exorbitant levy imposed on the peasants when the local tyrants and evil gentry dominated rural administration, for example, the surcharge on each muo land, have been abolished or at least reduced with the rise of peasant movement and the downfall of the local tyrants and evil gentry. This too should be counted among the achievements of peasant associations. 12. The movement for education. In China education has always been the exclusive preserve of the landlords, and the peasants have had no access to it. But the landlord's culture is created by the peasants, for its sole source is the peasant sweat and blood. In China 90% of the people have had no education, and of these the overwhelming majority are peasants. The moment the power of the landlords was overthrown in the rural areas, the peasants' movement for education began. Say how the peasants who hitherto detested the schools are today zeal 54 maotse tongue, housely setting up evening classes. They always disliked the foreign-style school. In my student days, when I went back to the villa and saw that the peasants were against the foreign-style school, I too used to identify myself with the general run of foreign-style students and teachers, and stand up for it, feeling that the peasant were somehow wrong. It was not until 1925, when I lived in the countryside for 6 months and was already a communist and acquired the Marxist viewpoint, that I realized I had been wrong and the peasants right. The texts used in the rural primary school were entirely about urban things and unsuited to rural needs. Beside the attitude of the primary school teachers towards the peasants were very bad and, far from being helpful to the peasants, they became objects of dislike. Hence the peasants preferred the old-style Chinese classes, as they called them, to the modern schools, they called foreign classes and the old-style teachers to the in the primary schools. Now the peasants are enthusiastically establishing evening classes, which they call peasant schools. Some have already been opened, others are being organized, and on the average there is 1 school per township. The peasants are very enthusiastic about these schools, and regard them, and only them, as their own. Funds for the evening schools come from the public revenue for superstition, from ancestral temple funds, and from other republic funds or property. The county education boards wanted to use this money to establish primary schools, that is, foreign-style school not suited to the needs of the peasants, while the latter wanted to do it for peasant schools, and the outcome of the dispute was that both got some of the money. Though there are places where the peasant got it all. The development of the peasant movement has resulted in a rapid rise in their cultural level. Before long tens of thousands of schools will have sprung up in the villages throughout the proving this is quite different from the empty talk about universal education which the intelligentsia and the so-called educationalists have been bandying back and forth and which after all this time remains empty phrase. 13. The cooperative movement. The peasants really need cooperatives, and especially consumer marketing and credit cooperatives. When they buy goods, the merchants exploit them. When they sell their farm produce, the merchant investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 5, cheat them. When they borrow money or rice, they are fleeced by usurers. and they are eager to find a solution to these three problems. During the fighting in the Yangtze Valley last winter, when trad routes were cut and the price of salt went up in Hunan, many peasant organized cooperatives to purchase salt. When the landlords deliberately stopped lending, there were many attempts by the peasant to organize credit agencies, because they needed to borrow money. A major problem is the absence of detailed, standard rules of organization. As these spontaneously organized peasant cooperatives often fail to conform to cooperative principles, the comrades working among the peasants are always eagerly inquiring about rule and regulations. Given proper guidance, the cooperative movement can spread everywhere along with the growth of the peasant associations. 14. Building roads and repairing embankments. This too is one of the achievements of the peasant associations. Before there were peasant associations, the roads in the countryside were terrible. Roads cannot be repaired without money, and as wealthy were unwilling to dip into their purses, the roads were left in a bad state. If there was any road work done at all, it was done as an act of charity. A little money was collected from families wishing to gain merit in the next world, and a few narrow, skimpily paved roads were built. With the rise of the peasant associations, order have been given specifying the required width, 3, 5, 7 or 10 feet, according to the requirements of the different routes, and each landlord along a road has been ordered to build a section. Once the order is given, who dares to disobey? In a short time many good roads have appeared. This is no work of charity but the result of compulsion, and a little compulsion of this kind is not at all a bad thing. The same is true of the embankments. The ruthless landlord were always out to take what they could from the tenant peasant and would never spend even a few coppers on embankment repairs. They would leave the ponds to dry up and the tenant peasants to starve, caring about nothing but the rent. Now that there are peasant associations, the landlords can be bluntly ordered to repair the embankments. When a landlord refuses, the association will tell him politely, very well. If you won't do the repairs, you will contribute grain, a 2 for each workday. As this is a bad bargain for the land 56 Maotse tongue, Lord, he hastens to do the repairs. Consequently many defective embankments have been turned into good ones. All the 14 deeds enumerated above have been accomplished by the peasants under the leadership of the peasant association. Would the reader please think it over and say whether any of these is bad in its fundamental spirit and revolutionary significance? On the local tyrants and evil gentry, I think, we'll call them bad. Curious enough, it is reported from Nanchang 32 that Chiang Kai-shek, Cha Ching-chang 33 and other such gentlemen do not altogether approve of the activities of the Hunan peasants. This opinion is shared Liu Qi 34 and other right-wing leaders in Hunan, all of who say, they have simply gone red. But where would the nation revolution be without this bit of red? To talk about arousing masses of the people day in and day out and then to be scared death when the masses do rise, what difference is there between and Lord She's love of dragons? 35 notes. 1. Hunan province was then the center of the peasant movement in China. 2. Chao Hengti, the ruler of Hunan at the time, was the agent of the North warlords. He was overthrown by the Northern Expeditionary Army in 1926. 3. The revolution of 1911 overthrew the autocratic regime of the Qing dynasty on October 10 of that year. A section of the Qing dynasty's new army staged uprising in Wushang, Hubei province, at the urging of bourgeois and petty bourge revolutionary societies. It was followed by uprisings in other provinces, and very soon the rule of the Qing dynasty crumbled. On January 1, 1912, the Provisional Government of the Republic of China was set up in Nanking, and Sun Yat-sen was elected provisional president. The revolution achieved victory through the alliance of bourgeoisie with the peasants, workers and urban petty bourgeoisie. But state power fell into the hands of the northern warlord Yuan Shikai, and the revolution failed because the group which led it was conciliationist in nature, failed to give our benefits to the peasants and yielded to imperialist and feudal pressure. For these were the virtues of Confucius, as described by one of his disciples. 5. The old Chinese phrase, exceeding the proper limits in riding a run, was often quoted for the purpose of restricting people's activities. Reforms to remained within the framework of the established order were to be permitted. The activities aiming at the complete destruction of the old order were to be forbidden. Actions within this framework were regarded as proper, but those that aim at completely destroying the old order were described as exceeding the proper limits. It is a convenient doctrine for reformists and opportunists in the revolutionary ranks. Comrade Mao Zedong refuted this kind of reformist doctrine investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 5. His remark in the text that proper limits have to be exceeded in order to right wrong, or else the wrong cannot be righted, meant that the mass revolutionary method and not the revisionist reformist method had to be taken to end the old feudal order. 6. Chiang Kai-shek had not yet been fully exposed as a counter-revolutionary. The winter of 1926 and the spring of 1927, when the Northern Expeditionary Army was marching into the Yangtze Valley, and the peasant masses still thought that H was for the revolution. The landlords and rich peasants disliked him and spread the rumor that the Northern Expeditionary Army had suffered defeats and thought he had been wounded in the leg. Chiang Kai-shek came to be fully revealed as counter-revolutionary on April 12, 1927, when he staged his counter-revolutionary coup d'état in Shanghai and elsewhere, massacring the workers, suppressing peasants and attacking the Communist Party. The landlords and rich peasants changed their attitude and began to support him. 7. Kwanton was the first revolutionary base in the period of the First Revolutionary Civil War. 8. Wu Peifu was one of the best known of the northern warlords. Together with Cao Can, who was notorious for his rigging of the presidential election in 1923 by bribing members of parliament, he belonged to the Chile, Hopei, clique. He supported Cao as the leader, and the two were generally referred to as Cao Wu. In 1920, after defeating Tuan Kaijui, warlord of the Anhui clique, Wu Peifu gained control of the northern warlord government in Peking as agent of the Anglo-American imperialists. It was he who gave the orders for massacre, on February 7, 1923, of the workers on strike along the Peking-Hankou Railway. In 1924 he was defeated in the war with Chang Tso-lin, commonly known as the war between the Chile and Fengtian cliques, and he was thoroughly ousted from the Peking regime. In 1926 he joined forces with Chang Tso-lin at instigation of the Japanese and British imperialists, and thus returned to power when the Northern Expeditionary Army drove northward from Kwanton in 1926. He was the first foe to be overthrown. 9. The Three People's Principles were Sun Yat-sen's principles and program for the bourgeois democratic revolution in China on the questions of nationalism, democracy and people's livelihood. In 1924, in the manifesto of the First National Congress of the Kuomintang, Sun Yat-sen restated the Three People's Principles, interpreting nationalism as opposition to imperialism and expressing active support for the movements of the workers and peasants. The old Three People's Principle thus developed into the new, consisting of the three great policies, that is, alliance with Russia, cooperation with the Communist Party, and assistance to the peasant and workers. The new Three People's Principles provided the political basis for cooperation between the Communist Party of China and the Kuomintang during the First Revolutionary Civil War period. 10. The Chinese term for long life is Wansui, literally 10,000 years, and was the traditional salute to the emperor. It had become a synonym for emperor. 11. Rich peasants should not have been allowed to join the peasant associations, a point which the peasant masses did not yet understand in 1927. 12. Here the utterly destitute means the farm laborers, the rural proletariat and the rural lumpen proletariat. 13. The less destitute means the rural semi-proletariat. 14. Yuan Suming was a warlord of Quaikou province who controlled the western part of Hunan. 58. Maotse Tung. 15. A tenant generally gave his landlord, as a condition of tenancy, a depot in cash or kind, often amounting to a considerable part of the value of the land, though this was supposed to be a guarantee for payment of rent. It actually represented a form of extra exploitation. 16. In Hunan, the two corresponded to the district and the Tuan to the TOWNSH. The old administrations of the Tu and the Tuan type were instruments of landlord rule. 17. The tax per mu was a surcharge on top of the regular land tax, ruffles imposed on the peasants by the landlord regime. 18. Under the regime of the northern warlords, the military head of a province was called military governor. But he was the virtual dictator of the province with administrative as well as military power gathered in his hands. In League W the imperialists, he maintained a separatist feudal militarist regime in his locality. 19. The standing household militia was one of the various kinds of armed forces in the countryside. The term household is used because some member almost every household had to join it. After the defeat of the revolution in 192, the landlords in many places seized control of the militia and turned them in armed counter-revolutionary bands. 20. At the time, many of the county headquarters of the Kuomintang, under leadership of the Kuomintang Central Executive Committee in Wuhan, pursued Dr. Sun Yat-sen's three great policies of alliance with Russia, cooperation with the Communist Party, and assistance to the peasants and workers. They conceded to the revolutionary alliance of the communists, the left-wingers of the Kuomintang and other revolutionaries. 21. Lord Pao Chang, was prefect of Kaifeng, capital of the North Sung dynasty. He was famous in popular legend as an upright official and a fearless, impartial judge with a knack of passing true verdicts in the cases he tried. 22. This reference to archery is taken from Mencius. It describes how the EXP teacher of archery draws his bow with a histrionic gesture but does not release arrow. The point is that while communists should guide the peasants in attaining a full measure of political consciousness, they should leave it to the peasants' own initiative to abolish superstitious and other bad practices, and should not give orders or do it for them. 23. The 8 characters were a method of fortune-telling in China based the examination of the 2 cyclic characters each for the year, month, day and hour of a person's birth respectively. 24. Geomancy refers to the superstition that the location of one's ancestral grave influences one's fortune. The geomancers claim to be able to tell whether a particular site and its surroundings are auspicious. 25. Lord Quan, a warrior in the epic of the Th Kingdoms, was widely worshipped by the Chinese as the god of loyalty, and 26. Tang Shengqi was a general who sided with the revolution in the North Expedition. Ye Kaisan was a general on the side of the northern warlords fought against the revolution. 27. Sun Chuan Fang was a warlord whose rule extended over the 5 proving of Jiangsu, Zhejiang, Fujian, Qianji and Anhui. He was responsible for bloody suppression of the insurrections of the Shanghai workers. His main investigation of peasant movement in Hunan 5 was crushed in the winter of 1926 by the Northern Expeditionary Army in Nankin and Qiuqiang, Jiangxi Province. 28. In China a dish is served in a bowl or a plate for the whole table, and no individually. 29. Oriental culture was a reactionary doctrine which rejected modern scientific civilization and favored the preservation of the backward mode of agricultural production and the feudal culture of the Orient. 30. For the secret societies, see analysis of the classes in Chinese society note 18, pages 21 of this volume. 31. Mountain, lodge, shrine, and river were names used by primordial secret societies to denote some of their sects. 32. When Nanchang was captured by the Northern Expeditionary Army in November 1926, Chiang Kai-shek seized the opportunity to establish his general headquarters there. He gathered around himself the right-wing members of Th Kuomintang and a number of northern warlord politicians and, in collusion with the imperialists, hatched his counter-revolutionary plot against Wuhan, the revolutionary center. Eventually, on April 12, 1927, he staged his counter-revolutionary coup d'état which was marked by tremendous massacres in Shanghai. 33. Chang Ching-chang, a right-wing Kuomintang leader, was a member of Chiang Kai-shek's brain trust. 34. Liu Qi was head of the Left Society, an important anti-communist group in Hunan. 35. As told by Lu Xiang, 77-6 BC in his Xinshu, Lord Xie was so fond of dragons that he adorned his whole palace with drawings and carvings of them, but when a real dragon heard of his infatuation and paid him a visit, he was frightened out of his wits. Here Comrade Mao Zedong uses this metaphor to show that though Chiang Kai-shek and his like talked about revolution, they were a cry of revolution and against it. The Second Revolutionary Civil War, period.